You are terrified of being alone. I did not ask you if you think you are terrified. I did not ask you if you feel like a confident person. I am telling you, as a matter of psychological, spiritual, and biological fact, that the majority of human beings walking this earth today are running. Running from silence. Running from stillness. Running from the one person they cannot escape. Themselves. You wake up in the morning, and before your feet touch the floor, before you have said a single word to God, before you have honored the gift of a new day, your hand is already reaching for that phone. You are already plugging yourself into someone else's noise, someone else's drama, someone else's opinion about something that has nothing to do with your destiny. Why? Because silence terrifies you. Because in the silence, you might actually hear your own thoughts. And your own thoughts might tell you something you are not ready to confront. Your own thoughts might tell you that you are wasting your life. That you are shrinking yourself to fit into rooms that were never built for your size. That you have been performing for an audience that does not even care about your future. So instead of facing that truth, you fill the room with noise. You call people you do not even like. You scroll through feeds full of strangers, living lives you secretly envy. You surround yourself with what I call comfortable mediocrity. A crowd of average people going nowhere, but going there together. So nobody feels the shame of standing still alone. And I need you to hear this. That crowd is not your community. That noise is not your culture. That comfort is not your calling. It is your cage. And the tragedy, the absolute soul-crushing tragedy, is that you built it yourself, bar by bar, distraction by distraction, compromise by compromise. You built a prison and decorated it so beautifully that you call it a social life. Today, that changes. Today, I'm going to show you that the most dangerous, the most powerful, the most historically transformative human beings who ever lived, every single one of them had one thing in common. They were willing to be alone, not because they were rejected, not because they were broken, but because they understood something that the crowd will never understand. Greatness is not a group activity. Segment 2, the eagle deep storytelling. I want to tell you about an eagle. Now, I need you to stop whatever picture is forming in your mind right now. The motivational poster, the screensaver, the logo on some company's letterhead. And I need you to actually think about this creature. Because the eagle carries within its biology one of the most profound lessons about human potential that has ever been encoded into the natural world. The eagle does not fly with sparrows. Now, that sounds simple. That sounds like a fact you already knew. But I want you to go deeper with me. I want you to understand why the eagle does not fly with sparrows. Because it is not about arrogance. It is not about pride. It is not about the eagle believing it is better than the sparrow. It is about altitude. You see, the sparrow was designed for a certain altitude. The sparrow functions at a level close to the ground, close to the noise, close to the crowd. And the sparrow is perfectly effective at that level. I am not condemning the sparrow, but the eagle was engineered for something different. The eagle was built for the high places. And here is the thing that most people miss. The air that sustains the eagle at 10,000 feet would suffocate the sparrow. Read that again in your mind. The very atmosphere in which the eagle thrives is the atmosphere in which the sparrow dies. And this means if the eagle spends its life trying to stay at the sparrow's level, trying to keep the sparrow comfortable, trying to be accepted by the sparrow's flock, the eagle never discovers what it was built for. And we have millions of eagles today sitting on fence posts with sparrows. Brilliant minds, extraordinary gifts, world-changing potential, sitting on fence posts, pecking at the ground, pretending to be something they were never designed to be, because they are afraid of the isolation that comes with altitude. Let me tell you something else about the eagle. When a storm comes, and I mean a real storm, the kind that sends every other bird running for cover, the kind that grounds the pigeons and scatters the sparrows, the eagle does not hide. The eagle spreads his wings, because the eagle was designed to use the very wind that destroys other birds as a lift mechanism. The storm that is the end of the sparrow is the beginning of the eagle's ascent. The eagle locks its wings at a specific angle and uses the turbulence, the very thing that threatens to destroy it, as a vehicle to carry it higher than it could fly on a calm day. Are you hearing this? The crisis that is killing the people around you, the rejection, the loneliness, the being misunderstood, the being left out that same storm, if you position yourself correctly, is designed to carry you to an altitude that comfort never could. But here is the condition. Here is the non-negotiable requirement. The eagle must be alone to catch that wind. You cannot lock into a thermal current when you are surrounded by a flock that keeps pulling you back to earth. You cannot ascend when you are emotionally tethered to people who have chosen the ground. The eagle's power is inseparable from the eagle's solitude. And now I want to go from the sky to the soil, because I need to give you another picture. A picture that is even more uncomfortable than the eagle, because this one happens in the dark. Think about a seed. A seed is remarkable. A single seed contains within it the architectural blueprint for a tree that could stand for 100 years. A tree that could provide shade for generations. A tree whose roots could anchor an entire hillside against erosion. A tree that could house birds, produce fruit, and release oxygen that keeps other living things alive. All of that compressed into something so small you could hold it between two fingers. But here is what nobody wants to talk about. Before that seed becomes a tree, before it fulfills even the smallest fraction of what it was designed to do, it must go through a process that looks from the outside like absolute defeat. It must be buried alone, in the cold, in the dark, in the dirt, covered completely, sealed off from the light, surrounded by pressure on every side. And in that darkness, something has to die before something greater can live. The outer shell of the seed, the protective layer, has to crack open and disintegrate. The very thing that kept the seed safe during its journey has to be surrendered before growth can begin. And if you dug that seed up after 2 days and looked at it, you would not see growth. You would see what looks like rot. You would see what looks like failure. You would see something that appears to be falling apart. But it is not dying. It is processing. And I am looking into the camera right now because I need to speak to someone who has been in the ground for what feels like too long. Someone who feels like they are buried. Someone who has been removed from the crowd, cut off from the noise, isolated from the social world. And every day you wake up feeling like nothing is happening, feeling invisible, feeling forgotten. You are not dying. You are processing. The darkness is not your punishment. The isolation is not your rejection. The burial is not your ending. It is your preparation. Segment 3, the Myles Munroe philosophy. Separation for preparation. I have spent decades studying the lives of people who changed the world. Not people who became famous, not people who accumulated wealth or followers or social approval. People who actually shifted the trajectory of human history. And I have noticed a pattern so consistent, so undeniable, that I am convinced it is not coincidence. I am convinced it is principle. Every single one of them went through a period of radical isolation before their moment of radical impact. Moses, 40 years in the wilderness. 40 years. Most people cannot survive 40 days of silence. Moses spent 40 years on the backside of a desert, away from the palace where he was raised, away from the people he thought he was destined to lead. 40 years of anonymity. 40 years where the world forgot his name. And it was in that wilderness, in that absolute isolation, that God showed up in a burning bush and said, now you are ready. Joseph thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned, year after year after year of isolation. So complete that from the outside it looked like abandonment. It looked like the end of a promising life. But the pit was not his prison. The pit was his processing plant. And when the moment came, when the door opened and Joseph walked out of that prison, he did not walk out broken. He walked out as a man so refined by isolation, so sharpened by silence, so deepened by suffering, that within 24 hours, he went from prison to palace. Because the isolation had done its work. Do you understand what I am telling you? God does not isolate people he has finished with. God isolates people. He is not done preparing. The silence is not the sound of heaven ignoring you. The silence is the sound of heaven working on you. And this brings me to what I call the principle of separation for preparation. Every time God is about to elevate someone to a level of impact they have never operated at before, he first separates them from the crowd. Not because the crowd is evil, not because the people in your life are bad people, but because the next level of your development requires a level of concentration that is impossible in the presence of constant social stimulation. So, think about a surgeon. When that surgeon is about to perform the most delicate, the most consequential, the most intricate operation of their career, what do? They clear the room. They silence the noise. They create an environment of absolute focused intentionality, because the work that is about to happen demands every ounce of cognitive and skilled energy that surgeon possesses. God treats your destiny the same way. When he is about to do something extraordinary in your life, when he is about to cut away the things that don't belong, when he is about to rewire the way you think, when he is about to install a level of wisdom and character and depth that will sustain the weight of the calling on your life, he clears the room. And here is where most people make the most catastrophic mistake of their lives. They fight it. They feel the isolation coming. They feel the friendships cooling, the invitation stopping, the social world pulling back. And instead of surrendering to the process, they panic. They chase the crowd. They manufacture social connection. They perform and entertain and make themselves available to anybody who will give them attention, because the silence feels like rejection, and rejection feels like death. And in their panic, in their desperate scramble to fill the silence, they interrupt the surgery, and they walk away from the operating table only half healed, half prepared, half formed. And they spend the rest of their lives wondering why they feel incomplete, why they feel like they were meant for something more but can never quite reach it, why the greatness they sense inside themselves never fully materializes. The answer is devastating in its simplicity. They chose the crowd over the calling. And this brings me to something I need you to sit with. Something that may be the most uncomfortable truth I will speak today. The graveyard is the wealthiest place on earth. I have said this for years, and I will say it until I take my last breath, because I believe it is one of the most important statements a human being can hear. Buried in the ground beneath the headstones and the flowers, and the grief lies more unrealized potential than all the wealth of all the world's economies combined. Buried in that ground are novels that were never written, cures that were never discovered, businesses that were never built, movements that were never started, songs that were never recorded, children who were never inspired by a mentor who died before they spoke. Buried in the ground are people who had everything required to change the world. And they took it with them. Not because they lacked talent, not because they lacked intelligence, not because circumstances were too hard or doors were too closed, but because at the critical moment, at the moment when isolation came to refine them, when the crowd fell away and the silence settled in, they made a choice. They chose to be liked over being legendary. They chose to fit in over standing out. They chose the noise of belonging over the power of becoming. And I absolutely refuse to allow that to be your story. Segment 4, monk mode, the cold power of solitude. I want to talk to you now about a different kind of person. Not a loud person, not a person who announces themselves, not the person in the room who needs to be seen or heard or validated. I want to talk to you about the person in the corner. The person who disappeared for 6 months and came back different. The person who stopped posting, stopped calling, stopped showing up at events. And when they finally emerged, there was something in their eyes that had not been there before. A depth, a stillness, a quiet, terrifying confidence. That person went somewhere that most people are too afraid to go. They went inward. I want to teach you today about what happens when a human being makes the radical, intentional, courageous decision to enter a season of deep isolation. Not the isolation of rejection, not the isolation that is done to you, but the isolation that you choose, the isolation that you pursue as a spiritual discipline and a psychological practice, what some people today call monk mode. The monks understood something about human potential that our entertainment saturated, notification addicted, dopamine hijacked culture has completely forgotten. They understood that the human mind, left to its own devices in a quiet environment, without the constant stimulus of social input, will begin to do something extraordinary. It will begin to think, not react, not respond, not perform, not compare, not compete. Think, and I mean think at a level of depth and clarity and creative power that is utterly inaccessible to the person who is constantly connected. I mean, think at the level where your purpose starts to come into focus, where the noise of everyone else's opinion fades and the whisper of your own design begins to be audible. When you enter monk mode, when you make the decision to disappear, the first thing that happens is uncomfortable. I will not lie to you. The first 48 to 72 hours of real silence are almost physically painful for a person who has been living in constant noise. Your brain will rebel. It will manufacture anxiety. It will convince you that you are missing something critical. It will send you compulsive impulses to check your phone, to text someone, to turn on a screen, to fill the room with something. Because your brain has been trained, conditioned, like a laboratory animal, to require constant external stimulation to feel safe. But if you hold the line, if you sit in that discomfort and refuse to reach for the distraction, something begins to shift. The noise starts to settle. Like silt in a disturbed pond, when you stop stirring the water, everything that was suspended in the chaos begins to slowly fall to the floor, and the water begins to clear. And in that clarity, in that still, quiet, clear water, you begin to see things that were invisible when the water was moving. You begin to see yourself, not the self you perform for others, not the self that exists in the opinions and projections and expectations of the people around you, but the actual, original, designed by God self that has been buried under years of noise and conformity and social programming. And let me tell you what that self looks like when you finally meet it. It is powerful. Not in a loud way. Not in a way that needs to announce itself. But in the way that a mountain is powerful. In the way that deep water is powerful. In the way that an ancient tree is powerful. A quiet, settled, unshakable power that does not derive its strength from the approval of anyone. A power that is sourced in purpose rather than performance. This is what isolation produces. This is what the crowd will never give you. Because the crowd can only give you a reflection. The crowd can only give you a mirror that shows you who they need you to be. And if you spend your entire life building your identity from the reflections in other people's eyes, you will reach the end of your life having lived someone else's story. I need you to hear what I'm about to say with every cell of your being. You cannot discover who you are in the presence of people who need you to be something else. The discovery of self, the confrontation with your actual purpose, your actual genius, your actual capacity, that happens in the quiet, that happens in the alone, that happens in the dark, silent, seemingly empty spaces that the world calls loneliness, but that I call laboratories. So let me give you the assignment. Let me give you the practice. Disappear. I am not speaking metaphorically. I mean literally, intentionally, strategically. Withdraw from the social theater. Start with 1 day a week. 1 full day where you do not perform for anyone. Where your phone is not a portal to other people's noise. Where you sit with your thoughts and your God and your journal and the deepest questions of your own existence. Then extend it. Extend it to a weekend. Extend it to a week. And if you are serious, if you are genuinely ready to do the kind of internal work that produces the kind of external results that most people only dream about go dark for a season. Cut off the social media. Stop attending every event. Stop being available to every person who wants a piece of your time and energy. Become unreachable. Not because you are antisocial, not because you are depressed, not because you have given up on human connection, but because you are working. You are doing the heavy lifting in the dark that will make everything you touch in the light extraordinary. You are reading the books that are going to rewire your paradigm. You are building the skills that are going to make your gift undeniable. You are developing the character that is going to be able to sustain the weight of the platform that is coming. You are becoming, and becoming is never a public process. Every butterfly that has ever existed went through its transformation inside a cocoon, sealed off, enclosed, hidden from the world. Hidden, and inside that cocoon, something happens that is so violent, so total, so radical in its nature, that if you could look inside and see it, you would not call it transformation. You would call it destruction, because that is what it looks like. The caterpillar does not simply grow wings. The caterpillar dissolves almost completely into a biological substance that at its lowest point has no structure, no form, no identifiable function. It is just raw material. Raw material being reorganized by the intelligence encoded in its DNA into something that its former self could never have imagined. And when the butterfly emerges, when it finally tears through the walls of that cocoon, it does not emerge gradually. It tears through with force, with intensity, with the accumulated pressure of the entire transformation period. And the tearing is not incidental. The resistance of that cocoon wall is what forces fluid into the butterfly's wings, giving them the strength they need to fly. If you cut the cocoon open to help the butterfly out early, if you interrupt the process out of compassion, out of impatience, out of the inability to watch the struggle, the butterfly will emerge with wings that cannot carry it. You will have saved it from the struggle and sentenced it to the ground. Do not let anyone cut your cocoon open early. Do not let the discomfort of isolation convince you to break out before you are finished. Do not let the loneliness of the process seduce you back into the crowd before your wings are ready. Let the process complete itself. Segment 5, the final charge. I want to close with this. I have watched over decades of studying human potential and purpose. What happens to people who embrace isolation versus people who flee it? And the difference is not subtle. The difference is not marginal. The difference is the difference between a life that echoes and a life that evaporates. The people who flee isolation, who cannot tolerate silence, who must always be plugged in, always performing, always surrounded. Those people often appear successful by the world's metrics. They often have large social circles and active feeds and calendars full of events. They appear connected, they appear relevant, but there is a hollowness behind the eyes, a restlessness that never fully quiets, a hunger that no amount of social validation ever satisfies. Because the thing they are actually hungry for, the thing every human soul is desperate for, is not connection with others. It is connection with purpose. And purpose is found in the quiet. Purpose is found in the alone. Purpose is the voice that only speaks when all the other voices have been silenced. The people who embraced isolation, who had the courage to go inward, who sat in the silence long enough for it to become productive rather than just painful, those people emerged as a different category of human being. Not better than others, but different. Anchored in a way that others are not. Grounded in a way that the crowd cannot provide. Moving through the world with a quiet, settled authority that turns heads without demanding attention. That is who you were designed to be. And I need you to understand, I need this to land in the deepest part of your consciousness. That the isolation you are afraid of is not your enemy. It is your invitation. Every time the crowd pulls back, it is an invitation. Every time the phone stops ringing, it is an invitation. Every time the season of popularity ends and the season of anonymity begins, it is an invitation. Every time you feel the walls closing in and the silence getting louder, that is not abandonment. That is a summons. A summons to the place where your greatness is waiting for you. A summons to the laboratory where your genius gets developed. A summons to the altar where the version of you that is capable of fulfilling your actual purpose gets forged. Do not RSVP with fear. Answer with courage. Go into the alone. Go into the silence. Go into the dark and the cold and the uncomfortable stillness and stay there long enough to hear what he's been trying to tell you. Because I promise you, on the authority of every great life I have ever studied, and on the authority of the one who designed you, what waits for you in that silence is more valuable than anything the crowd could ever offer you. The graveyard does not need another resident. The world does not need another person who died with their music still inside them. Go into the alone. Do the work in the dark. Trust the process that looks like burial. And when you emerge, when the season of isolation has completed its work and the door opens and you step back into the world, you will not be the same person who went in. You will be someone the world has been waiting for. Protect your silence. Protect your solitude. Protect your process. Because the greatest thing you will ever do was born in a moment when you were completely, totally, and powerfully alone.